Welcome back, I'm Tedward, and today we're driving my E39 M5 2001 model year, and I've had this BMW for 9 years, and my opinion of this car has changed so much over the years, but some things have stayed the same. Number one, the timeless design. Every year this car just looks better and better to me, and this is like the BMW that I grew up on. This is the BMW that I dreamed of, and it really was a dream to buy it. But because I bought it in my early 20s, I drove it like a jerk for a while, and that was the thing. This was still a fast car when I bought it. Today, 400 horsepower sports sedan is like your run-of-the-mill anything. I mean, you're practically driving a Camry at this speed, but this car still really does have legs even today. It's just that torque from this S62 V8 pulls and pulls and pulls from so down low, which is why when I bought this, I thought it was so much cooler than the E46 M3, even though today I will concede, of course, the E46 M3 is the better driver's car. But when I bought this M5, I took so much pride in being able to walk away from an E46 M3 on a highway if I just got into the pedal, because this thing really could just pull and pull to its top speed. And when I bought this, that's what I did. I was a jerk. I mean, I didn't drive that fast, but like, I bought this car to be an Autobahn burner. And you can tell by a lot of the rock chips in the front of this car that I wasn't shy about driving it at triple-digit speeds, but that's actually not how I drive it today. And first up, I want to give some credit to Craft Detailing, because this car was swirled to I'm not going to say that word. It was bad. It was very bad. I had an outdoor cover that I was preserving the car under during the winters. Usually this car was covered during the winters. There's like 1 or 2 winters where I did not have garage space. Now the car lives at Garage 42 under a nice pillowy soft velvet cover on a battery tender. It's very happy, and Craft Detailing did an incredible job ceramic coating and paint correcting the car. So it really does look incredible for a 2001 with 82,000 miles on it. And I bought this at 62,000 miles. So I've really only put 20,000 miles on the car in 9 years. And you know, this season, I really do want to use it. Let's get in the car, take it for a ride, and I'll tell you about the ownership experience of a car that some of you probably didn't even know I owned, and the rest of you wondered, did he sell that thing? Funny that I even need to say that it has a key, but this one, it's funny, it has 2 keys. This one's the one that I use. It's a little yellowed and faded. The other key that I have for this car looks brand new. Here, we'll move this steering wheel so you can get a proper look at this dashboard. It is beautiful. I think this is one of my favorite dashboards. I love the gray face gauges, and this is something that came in the later cars, because the 2000 model year, which was the introduction of the M5 to the US, there was earlier ones in other parts of the world, but those had black face gauges, I believe, and a different steering wheel. Some other changes like the taillights, the headlights, and apparently the piston rings were different, because the original cars required 10W60, and they used a lot of oil. They burned a lot of oil. I think they even had like a little message on the fuel door that would say, add a quart every time you fill the tank, or something ridiculous like that. It was absurd. This doesn't really burn that much oil, and it takes 5W30. Now, I've driven loads of these things, and I actually really love the way mine is spec'd out, because when I bought it, wood trim was not it. You wanted the aluminum or the anthracite, or anything other than this wood trim. Now, I think the wood trim with the black leather looks fantastic. It's got the Alcantara headliner, which most, if not all of them had, and it has a leather dashboard and the leather on the lower door cards as well. So this car is well upholstered, and it really feels solid when you get in it. You definitely still feel like you're in something special, but it takes preservation, because like I said, if you were to leave this car out in like Arizona or California sunshine, this leather dashboard is probably going to disappear on you. It's just going to crack and rip, and it's going to be junk. So I've taken a lot of pride in making sure that this car, stays in good shape. This car has like the best air conditioning of any car I've ever owned. I'm always incredibly impressed by it. and we'll turn off that monitor, which is very old and mostly useless. But you don't buy it for the infotainment system. You buy it for like the buttery smooth S62 V8 that comes in this car. And that's the special thing here, is that we've got individual throttle bodies. We've got 400 horsepower, about the same amount of torque in this 4.94 liter V8. And it just pulls and pulls and pulls, and it pulls from way down low, unlike the high-strung V8s we got in BMWs later on, like the S65 and the E92 M3 that I own. And owning both of these cars together really highlighted how different in character they were. Because let's say you bought an E90 M3 and you also had an E39 M5. You'd think, well, you have two four-door V8 rear-wheel drive BMWs. Like, what are you doing? Well, I gotta tell you, this one and that one are not the same. They do not drive the same, and while they may serve some of the same purpose, this thing is just so outrageously special. And it has a much more meaty sound. But to keep this in driver's condition does take a bit of effort. This engine, this car is not without its expenses. And I think because the prices of these BMWs, what typically happen, right? You start out with this BMW, it costs like, let's say $70,000, $75,000 new back in 2001. I actually don't remember, but let's just call it that. And then they depreciate precipitously. So either people took a big hit or they kept them forever, and then they got sold for cheap, like, 40 grand. Then they get sold cheap again for like 20 grand. Then they get sold cheap again for like 19, then 15, then 12. By the time most of these E39s were scooped up by people like me, 10 years later, they had like 8 owners. And trust me, the owners who were buying them for cheap were not treating them well. They were not like the owners you want to have these cars. They were owners that were beating the crap out of them. They were getting them cheap, then realizing they couldn't afford to repair them. And then they just basically end up in a junkyard. You got to rebuild the whole thing. Now, I got lucky because my car I bought as the second owner. And my car had been dealer maintained by one person who put those 62,000 miles on it. And there's a 996 convertible, feeling very early 2000s German right now. That's great. So when I first bought the car, I'm dumb. I'm in my early 20s. Every time I get in the car, immediately sport mode and DSC off and laying rubber, trying to go sideways in second as much as I can. Always driving the car like respectably, but like not really having concern for anything that could break because I didn't care. I was just there to lay down some 275 section tire tracks behind me. That was the whole game. And now I find myself honestly often driving like it's a limo. Maybe not that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not trying to kick out the rear end. I'm enjoying the torque and I'm enjoying driving the car, but I'm really not out there just trying to wreak havoc like I used to, because that's what this car was back then. We didn't have YouTube. We had like streetfire.net and Mischief DVDs. That's all we had. And these were the types of cars that you'd see people like flogging around back roads, going 160 miles an hour down highways and doing donuts anywhere and everywhere. Now, my perception of this car has evolved so dramatically, and probably because I'm older, probably just because I'm in my 30s now, and to me, A, I want to have this car for a really long time and preserve it. I like having a preserved M5, but B, I don't see this as that car anymore. I see this as like a really capable limo, and like the fact that I can even like trundle along at under 1500 RPM and not really be lugging the engine, just kind of like, feeding it a tiny bit of throttle and riding that torque. That's so beautiful to me. I love this. And in 2022, this car has now become the perfect size. This used to be like a mid-size sedan. There was this 5 Series and a 7 Series. The 7 Series was the big boy. Now, this car is about the same size as my Civic Si. it's kind of wild. And I remember describing this car, getting in this car, feeling like I was a kid wearing his dad's suit. That's how I used to feel in this car when I got it. Now, this is an appropriate size because everything's grown up so much. I remember noticing that with Nissan's lineup the most when I was a kid, because you'd notice that the Sentra became the Altima, which became the Maxima, which just got huge. And it's just funny because like that is how the market has gone on all these cars. They're all so big now. And this car is now like, honestly, I feel like people wouldn't think of this as a family car. They'd say this is too small. Oh, I didn't use my blinker. I'm a proper BMW driver here. We'll make up for it here. But now this car just seems so proper and perfect. I mean, it's the perfect size to kind of maneuver around, but it is a heavy car. They used to call this the Beast on all the M5 forums because we didn't have Facebook groups back then. Everything was a forum post. And that's where you'd learn everything about your car because everyone would report their problems, their issues, and then they'd get into all the dirty details of DIY fixes and how things were made and kind of deconstruct and reverse engineer everything. But everyone referred to this car as the Beast. And that's what it was, because it could smoke the tires. It was a very aggressive thing that could pretty much go head to head with like a C5 Corvette, which is just outrageous for a 5-seat sports sedan. It's so cool. Oh, nice, beautiful paved roads. Now, they all came with a manual 6-speed. There was no automatic option, which really set it apart from the Mercedes, because all the AMG cars that were in the United States were automatics. You weren't really able to get an E55 AMG with a manual gearbox. So there was a piece of this car that felt much more like a driver's car. And I think it was a little more rigid than those cars too. Back in the day, it used to be that BMWs were the stiff ones and AMGs were the soft boys with all the torque. So this was your track weapon, I guess, and the AMG was just your luxury missile to go to work as fast as possible on the German Autobahn. But to keep this car in good nick, in functional order, has not always been the easiest thing. It has thrown many a check engine light at me. I've had to replace a bunch of stuff, but you know, at the end of the day, when you're talking about a 21-year-old car, stuff is going to start failing that isn't failing because it like broke. It's just failing because it's degraded. There's so much rubber in these cars, right? So any engine is going to have rubber hoses and gaskets and all kinds of stuff like that, and they're going to start leaking. So this car was just like fighting constant oil leaks, and that was a real bear because it really sucks to get in your driveway, back up and see oil leaking out of this car, especially because there is a drip tray underpan on the car. So when it does eventually pool up enough to give a drop on your driveway, trust me, there's a lot more sitting on that under tray than what's sitting on the driveway. So you knew any leak that you could visibly see on the ground was fairly serious. Oh, I love this thing. Take it nice and easy past these folks. We don't want to cause trouble. So this car has gotten a new clutch because the old clutch failed. It didn't wear down. It actually just I just love the sound of this engine. I don't want, like I said, I don't want to bother people. I just want to hear my engine once in a while. This clutch failed where it got stuck engaged, which was not good. There was like a spring or something, I don't know. It's just a malfunction. The original clutch failed. I had to have it replaced. That's when I met Weil Motorsport. That's when I met Jake Weil, who became like the mechanical steward of this car. And then years later, they're doing my valve cover gaskets. They've completely overhauled the cooling system, and I've documented all of this in videos because I wanted to show you guys what it was like to maintain these cars and try to get rid of oil leaks. But one pesky oil leak couldn't get rid of. It was very frustrating. You know, I thought it was the valve cover gaskets, which were leaking, but there was more. It was leaking from the rear main seal, and we mistakenly thought it was an upper oil pan gasket leak. And we dropped the whole upper and lower oil pan gaskets in this car, which is a big job. Replaced it, drove it home, still leaking. Guess it was the rear main seal. So dropped the transmission, went back in, and when you drop the transmission, you got to drop this exhaust, and this exhaust is one giant piece. Trust me, you learn about packaging, you learn about how these things were made really quickly when you've got to do jobs when you need to fix an oil leak. And most people just left them. They wouldn't fix those oil leaks because they'd say, well, that's too much work, I'm not going to bother. Look how amazing this is in the mid-range. It's just incredible. Now, one thing about this car is it does not have the most incredible brakes, so I do try to keep that in mind when I'm driving it. I would love to upgrade this thing. You know, it would be really cool to put like Hot Boy Stop Tech brakes in this thing. I think it would look really cool too. Man. The thing about this car though is that it really is timeless to drive. It's just modern enough because it's not like driving some old carbureted classic where you can't catch a brake and the thing won't start. Like, this thing always starts, and that's actually kind of a miracle because I've never replaced the battery in this car. It's a huge battery, it sits in the trunk, and it's funny when these batteries are so heavy that like putting a battery in the trunk was a careful consideration for weight distribution because that thing is massive. And yeah, so this battery is actually original and, or not original, but I think it was replaced right before I bought it. So it's at least 9 years old. And it goes to show that keeping a battery on a battery tender does extend the life because this probably should be dead. But anyway, the car always starts, it always runs, even when it's being troublesome, even when it was leaking, even when it was doing annoying things. Even when there was a check engine light on, the car always ran on me, like knock on wood trim, right? I never got stranded in the car, except for that clutch failure, which was just kind of a mechanical anomaly, and I can't really blame BMW for that. I think I just got a bad one, you know? That's just the way it goes. So now, this car has pretty much a fully sorted cooling system. It's paint corrected and it looks the part. We've got nice new Continental extreme contact rubber on the thing. And it sounds fantastic, and I've always wanted to leave this exhaust stock. Now, why is that? Because a lot of people want to cut this exhaust apart and just let it sing, and they sound good. But what I love about this car is the initial intent of being a wolf in sheep's clothing. Not only that, this is like a single piece exhaust all the way back, basically. And I didn't like the idea of cutting it. I want this to be stock. I want to preserve the most I can out of this car. I mean, sure, it's not going to go win an award at a concourse event, but why shouldn't I have some nice things, right? I'm not a rich guy. And if this is the nicest thing I have, I'm going to keep it really nice. I'm going to keep it good. I'm going to try to keep it in as original and, top spec as I can without breaking it. And that's why I think all of these cars became expensive, because they became test beds for tuner kids who just wanted to go street racing, and they got them cheap back then. And I want my car to be an example of what it was supposed to be. And that's like harder to find than a car that's been tuned, ripped apart, lowered, modified, supercharged, all those things. And those are all fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I would like to preserve my car to be the original intent of BMW, because I just think that this car signifies the best that BMW had to offer in the modern era. But this was a weird car, because when I bought it, I thought, oh, I'll get this great second car, I'll do all these road trips. But then the maintenance started adding up and I got scared of it. I got scared of the car because I thought, what if it breaks big? Like, what if something really goes wrong with this thing? That's gonna feel really painful, and I don't wanna pay for it. Oh, get off your phone. Please don't cross double yellows at oncoming traffic. That is... Oh, we live in a country of people who... Oh my God, he's going to hit the mailbox. What is going on? Nobody stares at the road when they're driving. And that's another reason why I stopped driving this car. So I was scared. There's a big vape cloud coming out of the thing too. I was scared to drive the car because I didn't want it to break on me in catastrophic fashion and be out, like 20 grand in repair costs. But in addition to that, this car is really clean. Sure, it's got some scuffs on the front from rock chips and stuff, but there's really no dings, dents, or anything bad on the car. And from clowns like this who just can't even stay in a lane, I never wanted to get T-boned in an intersection. I really hate commuting in this car because I'm afraid someone's gonna rear end me or do something stupid. And I just don't want to lose the car to anything but my own stupidity. I don't look at this. Like, what are we doing? These people can't even drive. Are they just high out of their minds? This is so upsetting. And putting your baby on the road with people like that is really difficult. It's really difficult to come to terms with having a fun car that you love while people are going head on at you in traffic. And, you know, I don't know if this person's drunk or texting, but like, it ain't good. And it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, they're not staying in their lane. They're literally just being a danger to society. So, you know, keeping your baby safe is more than just storing it properly. It's more than doing the maintenance. It's thinking about what time of day should I be out driving this thing. And, you know, I've always wanted a Caterham 7, but not sure that I'll get one because a Jeep Compass looks awfully big when you go head on in an open-wheeled, no-roof Lotus from essentially designed in the 1950s. So next steps on this car, if I really wanted to bring it up to snuff for like proper original driving experience, I'd probably have to, you know, revamp and refurbish this suspension. It could probably use dampers and bushings and tie rods and things of that nature. It's not bad, but you know, there's a couple little clunks, and I'm sure, you know, after all this time, it's just a little worn. You know, there's gotta be some parts that just cannot live 21 years, whether they're being driven or not. So, thank you guys so much for joining me on another drive in my E39 M5. I'm very happy that a check engine light did not appear on this drive. That's always a welcome sight with as few lights as possible without dead pixels. The E39 OGs will know what I'm talking about there. And I'm gonna go mosey home. Thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Thank you to the Patreon supporters for financial contributions and helping keep this channel alive every day. And don't forget to respect the drive. I'll see you in the next one.